The air didn't run out first. The memory did, or rather, it changed shape. We limped past Mars on a trajectory that no flight controller would have approved, burning what remained of our port engine in short, miserly pulses. The starboard unit had seized during our escape from the megaship's belly, and Park had spent 3 days cannibalizing sensor housings for replacement bearings before coaxing it back to something that resembled function. It ran hot. It ran loud. It ran. Billy plotted our course with the patience of a man threading a needle in a hurricane. We couldn't afford a direct burn to the outer system. Instead, we slung ourselves around Mars in a gravity assist that added velocity without costing fuel we didn't have. The red planet slid past our windows, close enough to see dust storms crawling across Valles Marineris, and for a few hours, the comms board lit up with automated Martian ground station pings, weather telemetry, geological survey loops, orbital maintenance schedules. All machine voices. Mars had never had a large permanent population, just research outposts and forward mining camps. But the silence where human chatter should have been was the same silence we'd left behind at Earth. "Any sign of the containers out here?" I asked Park as we cleared the assist window. He checked the long-range feeds. 3 passed through cislunar space on high-energy trajectories while we were still in low orbit. 2 are headed sunward. 1 is on a course that intersects the main belt. Beyond that, the ones aimed for the outer system are too far ahead of us to track with what we've got. And the megaship? Still in geocentric position. Still active. Material flows have decreased, though. Either it's finishing or it's shifting to a new phase. I filed that and moved on. There was nothing we could do about the megaship from out here. Our job now was simpler and harder. Survive long enough to matter. The first weeks past Mars were defined by repair. Every system on the Scarlet needed attention. Hull stress from the megaship insertion had opened microfractures along the port cargo spine. The shuttle's landing struts were bent. Half our communications array had been fried by field effects we still couldn't fully characterize. The water recycler developed a fault that turned everything it produced slightly bitter, a taste none of us could identify and Park couldn't filter out. We worked in shifts, 2 on repair, 2 on watch, rotating through the medbay to check on Korn. He had stabilized in a way that unsettled me more than his initial breakdown. His eyes tracked normally again. He could hold a conversation, follow orders, perform technical tasks. But there were gaps, moments when he would pause mid-sentence, his gaze fixed on something none of us could see, and then resume as though no time had passed. Once, while helping Billy replace a thruster coupling, he reached for a tool that wasn't in the kit, described it in detail, a curved probe with a rotating head and magnetic clamp, and seemed confused when no one recognized it. The tool he described didn't exist in any catalog I'd ever seen. Park believed it existed somewhere inside the megaship's fabrication decks. "He's not getting worse," Park told me during one of our private briefings in the narrow corridor outside the lab. "But he's not getting better either. The implanted patterns are integrating. They're not replacing him. They're adding to him. He's becoming a person who remembers things that happened to someone else, or something else." Can he function? For now. I wouldn't put him on anything critical without supervision. Noted. I didn't tell Park what I'd noticed on the night watches, that Korn sometimes whispered coordinates in his sleep. I'd checked the first set against our star charts. They corresponded to a point in the outer Kuiper belt where our pre-mission surveys had flagged an anomalous gravitational reading. At the time, we'd attributed it to instrument error and moved on. 53 days past Mars, we picked up the first signal that wasn't ours. Park caught it on the repaired long-range array during a routine sweep. A narrow-beam transmission, tightly focused, originating from somewhere ahead of us along the plane of the ecliptic. Not a broadcast, a directed communication between 2 points, neither of which was us. We'd stumbled into its edge by accident of trajectory. Frequency profile matches nothing in the civil or military index, Park said. He had dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there at Jupiter. But the modulation scheme has similarities to what we recorded from the megaship's internal traffic. Container to container? Maybe. Or container to something we haven't seen yet. I had him record everything without attempting to decode or reply. We were a damaged survey ship with a skeleton crew, not a signals intelligence platform. But the intercept told us something important. The system's components were talking to each other across interplanetary distances, coordinating in ways that implied a distributed architecture rather than a single command hierarchy centered on the megaship. Brandt had warned me about this before his line went dead. The system learned from every input. It adapted. If it had absorbed our survey data, our communications protocols, our organizational structures, then it would naturally evolve toward a network model, the same model humans had used to manage space operations for decades. We were watching our own logic reflected back at us, sharpened and stripped of hesitation. The second intercept came 8 days later, stronger and from a different bearing. This one carried something Park identified as a navigational handshake, 2 nodes confirming their relative positions and velocities before exchanging a dense burst of data. The burst lasted 11 seconds and contained more information than our entire mission archive. "They're not just traveling," Billy said when I briefed the crew. "They're building a network. Relay points, coordination nodes, the whole infrastructure. While moving," I added, "they don't need to stop and set up shop. The network grows as they spread." Ben, who had been quiet since the city, since the tower, looked up from his station. "Where are they going? All of them, I mean. Is there a destination?" "Everywhere," I said. "Every rock we ever tagged, every system we ever mapped, every route we ever flew. We gave them the road atlas. Now they're driving on it." Day 71 brought the crisis I'd been dreading. The water recycler failed completely. Not the slow degradation we'd been managing, but a catastrophic seal rupture that dumped 40 liters of processed water into the lower engineering bay before Park could isolate it. We saved most of it by mopping and filtering through emergency membranes, but the recycler itself was dead. Its core membrane had crystallized, a failure mode associated with exotic radiation exposure, the kind we'd taken inside the megaship. "Reserves give us 90 days at current consumption," Park reported. "We can stretch that to 120 if we cut rations and accept some dehydration risk." 120 days to where? Billy asked. That was the question. The outer system settlements were scattered and small. The largest, a mining consortium hub orbiting Ceres, might have had the capacity to support us, if it was still functioning, if it hadn't been visited by the containers, if its population hadn't vanished the same way Earth's had. We had no way of knowing without getting close enough to look, and Ceres was behind us now, falling away as we climbed toward Jupiter's orbit. Ahead of us lay the Jovian system, with its network of research stations, fuel depots, and ice mining operations. We'd departed from there months ago. Some of those installations were hardened and semi-autonomous, designed to operate for years without resupply. If even a fraction of them survived, we could find water, fuel, and possibly people. "Jupiter," I said. "We were headed that way anyway. Now we have a deadline." Billy adjusted our trajectory to optimize for the fastest approach to Callisto Station, the outermost and most isolated of the Jovian facilities. It had been a fuel depot and emergency shelter, crewed by a rotating staff of 12, powered by a small reactor buried in the ice. Its systems were old, analog-heavy, and largely disconnected from the central networks that the megaship had subverted. If anything in Jupiter space had survived, Callisto Station was the best candidate. We had 114 days of water. Callisto was 109 days away at our current velocity and fuel budget. 5 days of margin. In space, that's practically luxury. The dreams started around day 80. I don't usually remember my dreams. Career spacers learn to sleep efficiently. You close your eyes, the dark takes you, and you wake up when the alarm says so. But somewhere past the main belt, my nights began to fill with architecture. I dreamed of the megaship's interior. Not as I'd seen it, chaotic, overwhelming, a nightmare of hanging bodies and shifting walkways, but as a blueprint. Clean lines. Logical flow. I walked through fabrication bays that made sense, where every rack and conveyor served a clear purpose in a system I could almost understand. In the dreams, the bodies on the racks didn't disturb me. They were components in a process, like hull plates waiting for assembly. I moved among them with the calm familiarity of an engineer inspecting his own work. I woke from these dreams alert and uneasy, not because of what I'd seen but because of how I'd felt while seeing it. The dreams carried no horror. They carried comprehension. And I didn't trust comprehension that arrived uninvited. "Park," I said one morning, catching him before shift change. "Run a neural scan on me. Full spectrum." He raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. The scan took 20 minutes. He studied the results for an hour before coming to find me on the bridge. "You're clean," he said. "No anomalous structures. No pattern integration, nothing like what we see in corn. But your stress markers are elevated and your deep sleep architecture has shifted. You're spending more time in a phase that correlates with complex spatial processing." Meaning, your brain is working on something big while you sleep. Could be trauma processing. Could be your subconscious trying to model what we saw. It's not pathological yet. But given what happened to corn through direct contact, I'd want to know if indirect exposure could produce subtler effects over time. You think the sampling reached more than just corn? I think we all spent time inside that thing's field effects, and we don't fully understand what those fields do. Corn got the worst of it because he was physically linked. The rest of us might have gotten a lower dose of whatever information the system was pushing. I thought about telling him about the coordinates Corn whispered in his sleep, the ones pointing to the Kuiper Belt anomaly. I thought about telling him that in my dreams, I sometimes heard the planet-wide murmur, not as noise but as something approaching language, a slow, vast conversation conducted in shapes rather than words. I didn't. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because saying it out loud would make it a problem that needed solving, and we didn't have the resources to solve it. We had water for 109 days. We had a crippled ship. We had each other. Everything else was a luxury we couldn't afford. Day 96. Jupiter appeared as a visible disk in the forward display, banded and enormous, its moons arrayed like beads on invisible strings. We were still weeks from orbital insertion, but the sight of it changed the air aboard. People stood a little straighter. Conversations lasted a little longer. Ben started cooking again, improvising meals from our dwindling stores with a creativity born of desperation and, I think, hope. The hope lasted until day 98, when we detected the container. It was in a high Jovian orbit, stationary relative to the planet, positioned above the equator in a configuration that made my stomach clench with recognition. Not as large as the megaship above Earth, nothing could be, but built on the same principles. An open belly, hanging machinery, Material flows rising from below. Except here, the material wasn't coming from cities. It was coming from the moons. Park mapped the extraction lines. Thin streams of processed ice and minerals rose from Callisto, Ganymede, and Europa, feeding into the containers under structure. On the surface of Callisto, where our fuel depot should have been, thermal scans showed activity concentrated around the station site. Machinery moving. Structures being dismantled or repurposed. The station, Billy said quietly, may still be intact, I answered. They're working around it, not through it. The extraction lines are pulling from ice fields to the north and south. The station's reactor signature is still there. Or they're using the reactor to power their own operations. Possible. We watched from a distance of 2 million kilometers, too far to resolve details but close enough for broad-spectrum analysis. The container above Jupiter was smaller than what we'd seen at Earth, and its internal activity read differently. Less fabrication, more processing. It seemed to be refining raw materials rather than building bodies. Supply node, Park suggested. Resource depot for the network. Bodies get built at Earth or wherever the main ship sets up. Out here, they just collect fuel and feedstock. Which means fewer active replacement units on the ground, I said. Maybe none with combat capability. This might be automated extraction, not an occupation. That's a lot of might and maybe, Commander. It is. Which is why we're going to look before we leap. I ordered a slow approach, keeping the scarlet in Jupiter's magnetospheric noise to mask our signature. We'd learned from the city. No direct engagement, no ambitious plans, no attempts to interface with systems we didn't understand. We'd approach Callisto Station like what we were, a damaged ship looking for water, and deal with whatever we found using the most basic tools available. Patience and caution. The unsexy virtues. It took 11 more days to work our way into a low Callisto orbit without attracting attention from the container above. Billy flew the approach manually, using Jupiter's radiation belts as cover and timing our burns to coincide with magnetospheric fluctuations that would blur our thermal signature. It was the kind of flying that doesn't make for exciting stories, hours of waiting punctuated by seconds of precise adjustment, but it kept us alive. Callisto's surface spread below us, ancient and cratered, ice and rock in equal measure. The station sat in a shallow depression near the Valhalla impact basin, a cluster of pressurized modules around a central reactor housing, with landing pads, fuel tanks, and a small comm tower. From orbit, it looked intact. The reactor pulsed steadily. Exterior lights burned. The landing pads were clear. But the extraction lines we'd mapped from farther out were real. To the north and south, new structures had grown from the ice, low, angular machines that bore into the surface, melted and separated materials, and fed them into vertical launchers aimed at the container overhead. These machines operated without obvious crews. No replacement units walked among them. They ran themselves. No movement in the station perimeter, Park reported. Reactor output consistent with standby mode. Life support appears active. Atmospheric composition inside the main module reads breathable. Transponder. Station beacon is broadcasting on standard emergency loop. No updates since, he checked. Since 3 days after the megaship appeared at Earth. Someone set it to auto and then stopped talking. I made the call. We're going down. Same team as before. Billy flies, Park on systems, Ben and me on the ground. Korn stays aboard. Korn looked at me from his station with those eyes that sometimes focused on things in other rooms or other worlds. I could help down there, he said. I can feel the extraction machines. They're simple. They won't bother you. You can feel them. Like hearing traffic outside a window. Background noise. I know where they are and what they're doing without trying. I held his gaze. That's exactly why you're staying aboard. If something down there decides to talk to you, I want a hull between you and it. He didn't argue. He rarely did anymore. The shuttle touched down on the eastern pad with a crunch of ancient ice. Through the canopy, Callisto Station looked like every other deep space outpost I'd ever visited. Functional, ugly, built to survive rather than impress. The main airlock was 30 meters from the pad. We crossed the distance in low, bouncing strides, mag boots clicking against the pad surface, breath loud in our helmets. The airlock responded to standard codes. Green lights cycled. Pressure equalized. The inner door opened onto a corridor lit by strip LEDs at half brightness. Power-saving mode engaged long ago by hands that hadn't come back to change it. Air's good, Park confirmed. Cold, but good. Station thermostat is set to minimum habitable. We unsealed our helmets and moved inward. The station was small, a central hub connecting 4 radial modules for quarters, operations, storage, and the reactor access tunnel. We cleared each module in sequence, weapons up, moving with the careful efficiency of people who had already learned what happens when you assume a place is empty. The quarters module held 12 bunks, 6 occupied by personal effects, tablets, family photos, a half-read book splayed open on a pillow, a coffee mug with a dried ring at the bottom. The operations module held the main console, still active, scrolling status reports to no one. Storage was half full of supplies, food packs, medical kits, spare parts, and, critically, water reserves. Sealed tanks, clearly labeled, enough for our crew for months. Thank God, Ben whispered, the first words any of us had spoken aloud inside the station. The reactor module was locked. A handwritten note taped to the door read, "Do not enter. Automated cycle. See log entry 4471. Park found log entry 4471 on the operations console. It was a text file, typed in a hurry, dated 18 days after the megaship's arrival at Earth. Station crew departed for Ganymede Research Complex on emergency recall order received via automated military channel. I remained to maintain reactor and beacon. Extraction machines appeared on the surface 40 hours after crew departure. They have not approached the station. I believe the reactor's EM signature creates a zone they are programmed to avoid, or they have identified the station as irrelevant to their operations. I am securing the reactor module and setting all systems to automated standby. Water and food reserves are sufficient for one person for approximately 2 years. If anyone reads this and I am not here, I went north to observe the machines more closely. My suit beacon will be on Channel 7. The log was signed, Okonkwo, A. Station Technician, 2nd Class. Park checked Channel 7. A faint pulse came back, steady and slow, the heartbeat of a suit transponder in low-power mode. Bearing, north, consistent with the nearest extraction site. Range, 12 kilometers. Alive. Billy asked from the shuttle. Transponders active. Could be the suit broadcasting on its own. Or it could be a person. I looked at the water tanks, at the half-read book, at the coffee mug. Someone had stayed behind when everyone else left. Someone had chosen isolation over the unknown. That was a kind of courage I recognized. Not the dramatic kind, but the stubborn, quiet kind that keeps showing up for work after the world stops making sense. Ben, Start loading water onto the shuttle. Park, pull everything useful from the station's data stores. I want their logs, their sensor records, everything captured since the event. I paused. Then we go north. We found Okonkwo 12 kilometers out, in a shallow trench she'd dug between two of the extraction machines. She'd built a blind from insulating panels and positioned herself where she could observe both units without being in their direct operational path. Her suit was patched in 3 places with field repair tape. Her helmet visor was scratched to near opacity on one side. She was alive. She pointed a geological hammer at us when we appeared over the rim of her trench, then lowered it slowly when she saw our suits, our faces, the ISV patches on our shoulders. "You're real," she said. Her voice was hoarse from disuse. "Commander William West, Survey Vessel Scarlet. You're Okonkwo. Adiz Okonkwo. Station Tech. I've been watching these things for..." She trailed off, calculating. "I don't know how long." My suit clock drifted. "They do that near the machines. We know about the clock drift." She looked at me with an expression I'd seen in the mirror, the wary recognition of someone who has already seen too much to be surprised but not enough to stop being afraid. "Then you've been close to the big one," she said. "The one at Earth. Closer than we wanted." She nodded slowly, then began to climb out of her trench with the careful movements of someone who had learned to conserve every calorie. "I have data," she said. "Months of observation logs. These machines operate on a 47-hour cycle. They extract, process, launch, rest, repeat. During the rest phase, they power down to a level where I can get within arm's reach without triggering any response. I've taken samples from their waste streams. I've mapped their internal structure using the station's ground-penetrating radar. I know how they work. All by yourself. There wasn't anyone else." She said it without self-pity, the way you'd note the weather. I figured if anyone ever came back, they'd want to know what these things actually do, not just what they look like from orbit. I understood then that we'd found something rarer than water. We'd found a specialist who'd done the only thing that mattered in a catastrophe. She'd watched, she'd recorded, and she'd stayed sane. Back aboard the Scarlet, with the water tanks replenished and the station's data stores copied, we held the first real briefing since Earth. All 6 of us, Billy, Park, Ben, Korn, myself, and now Okonkwo, crowded into the bridge and went through what we knew. Okonkwo's data was meticulous. She documented the extraction machine's behavior in granular detail, built models of their processing cycles, and identified vulnerabilities, moments in the operational rhythm when critical systems were exposed or when power was redirected in ways that left subsystems unprotected. She'd done it with a geological hammer, a standard-issue scanner, and the kind of dogged patience that no amount of advanced technology could replace. "They're not smart," she said, pointing to her diagrams on the main display. "Not individually. Each machine follows a set of instructions that gets updated during the rest phase via a signal from the container overhead. Between updates, they're rigid. Predictable. If you disrupt the signal during the update window, they default to their last instruction set and repeat it until the next window." "So you can loop them," Park said. "Force them to repeat a cycle without advancing." "In theory. I never had the tools to try. But the principle is sound." Korn, who had been quiet through the briefing, spoke up. "The update signal uses a compressed format. I can see it. It's similar to the pattern traffic inside the megaship but much simpler. Like a dialect." Everyone looked at him. He met their eyes without flinching. "I'm still me," he said. I just know things I shouldn't. You can use that or you can be afraid of it. One of those helps us. I let the silence hold for a beat, then nodded. Korn works with Okonkwo on signal analysis. Park supervises. If we can disrupt the extraction cycle without drawing attention from the container above, we slow down the resource flow from the system. That's not saving the world. It's pulling one thread. And then, Billy asked, then we pull another. And another. We're not going to win this with one big move. The last time we tried that, we taught the system to harden itself. This time, we work small. We work local. We find what we can break without making it smarter. Okonkwo tilted her head. You've fought this thing before. I've made mistakes against it before. I'm hoping that counts as education. She almost smiled. Close enough. Over the next weeks, we established a rhythm. The Scarlet became a mobile base, parked in a low orbit that kept us below the container's apparent sensor horizon. Okonkwo and Korn worked together in a partnership that should have been impossible. The woman who'd spent months alone with a hammer and a scanner, and the man carrying alien architecture in his skull. They argued constantly, finished each other's analyses, and produced results neither could have reached alone. Their first success was small. They identified the exact frequency and timing of the update signal to a cluster of extraction machines on Callisto's northern ice field. During one rest phase, Park broadcast a captured copy of the previous cycle's update, overwriting the new instructions with old ones. The machines powered up and repeated their last cycle exactly, extracting from sites already depleted, processing material already processed, launching payloads of diminishing returns toward a container that expected fresh resources. The container didn't react. Its internal schedule absorbed the reduced input without visible adjustment. One cycle meant nothing against the scale of the operation. But we did it again. And again. Each time, Okonkwo refined the timing. Korn anticipated the signal shifts. Park tightened the broadcast parameters. After 2 weeks, the northern extraction site was producing at 60% of its original output, and the container above still hadn't changed its behavior. It's not adaptive at this level, Okonkwo concluded. The local machines are tools, not agents. They report upward, but the system above doesn't micromanage. It allocates resources on a macro scale and trusts the infrastructure to deliver. If the shortfall stays below some threshold, it gets absorbed into statistical noise. So we can bleed it, I said. Slowly. Slowly is the only speed that works against something this size. We expanded. Ben led ground teams to the southern extraction sites, planting signal repeaters that could loop the update cycle remotely. Billy made supply runs to the station, stockpiling fuel and materials. We mapped every extraction machine on Callisto's surface and built a schedule of interference that kept output falling without ever crossing the threshold that might trigger a systemic response. It wasn't heroic. It was maintenance work, the same kind of grinding, unglamorous effort that had defined my entire career. Tag rocks, file reports, adjust trajectories, argue over budget lines. Now we were tagging alien machines and adjusting their output curves. The skills transferred better than anyone might have guessed. 4 months into our Callisto operation, Korn woke me in the middle of a rest period with a hand on my shoulder and a face that had gone pale under the cabin lights. "They're coming," he said. "Who?" "New containers. 3 of them. Inbound from the inner system on fast trajectories. They're not supply vessels. They're carrying fabrication modules." He paused. "And bodies." I was on the bridge in 30 seconds. Park confirmed it. 3 new signatures, decelerating toward Jupiter space, each larger than the container currently in orbit. Their internal profiles matched what we'd seen in the megaship's belly, racks, assembly lines, the infrastructure of mass production. "The system is scaling up," Park said. "Whatever it's building out here, it's decided Callisto's output isn't enough. It's bringing in its own workforce. ETA. 11 days for the first. 14 and 17 for the others." I looked at our little operation, our looped signals, our carefully maintained extraction shortfalls, our slow and patient sabotage, and understood that it was about to be overwhelmed. 3 fabrication-capable containers would bring replacement units to the surface. Those units would find our repeaters. They would trace our interference. And then the statistical noise we'd been hiding in would resolve into a pattern with us at its center. "Options," I said. Billy spoke first. "We run. Head for the outer system now, before they arrive. Find another rock, start again." "Running is always on the table," I acknowledged. "What else?" Okonkwo was studying the approach vectors. "They're coming in along standard orbital mechanics. No exotic drives. They have to decelerate, which means they're vulnerable during the braking phase. Engines pointed forward, sensors focused on navigation, internal systems devoted to thrust management." "You're suggesting we hit them during approach?" "I'm suggesting that if you're ever going to use those survey penetrators for something other than poking asteroids, this is the moment. Not to destroy them, we don't have the firepower for that. But to damage guidance systems, disrupt the braking sequence, force them into orbits they didn't plan for. Buy time." "Time for what?" She met my eyes. "Time for whatever comes next. I don't have a grand plan, Commander. I've been living 12-hour cycles for months. But I know that in a complex system, delay compounds. Every hour those containers spend correcting course is an hour they're not building. And every hour they're not building is an hour we're still here." Korn added something that made the hair on my neck stand. "The first container. The one already in orbit. It knows we're here." Dead silence on the bridge. "It's known for weeks," he continued. "It classified us as irrelevant. Our interference was below its attention threshold, just like Okonkwo predicted. But the new containers arriving will change its classification model. More nodes means more processing. The threshold drops. What was noise becomes signal." "How do you know this?" Park demanded. Korn touched the back of his neck, where the sampling hub had left its mark. "I don't know how I know it. I just do. The same way I know the extraction cycle timing, the same way I knew about the update signals. It's in here." He tapped his temple. "And it's getting clearer. I had a decision to make, the kind that doesn't come with a manual or a precedent. Trust the man with alien patterns in his brain, or quarantine him and lose our best source of intelligence about the enemy's thinking." "Korn," I said, "if the container knows we're here and classified us as irrelevant, what happens when the new ones arrive and we get reclassified?" "It depends on what we do between now and then." "Explain." "The system prioritizes based on observed behavior patterns. Right now, our pattern reads as passive, small interference, no direct confrontation, consistent with environmental noise. If we stay passive, the reclassification might still flag us as low priority, just monitored instead of ignored. But if we attack the incoming containers, we change our pattern. We become active, hostile, worth responding to." There it was. The same trap as Earth. Every action taught the system something. Every intervention shaped how it categorized us. If we hit the containers, we'd buy time but earn attention. If we stayed quiet, we'd preserve our anonymity but lose it anyway when the new arrivals uncovered our sabotage. No clean options. Never clean options. There's a third possibility, Okonkwo said slowly. She'd been running calculations on her tablet, the same device she'd carried through months of solitary observation. We don't hit the containers. We don't stay quiet. We leave, but we leave something behind. She turned the tablet to face us. On the screen was a schematic of the signal repeaters we'd planted across Callisto's surface, overlaid with a new program. Right now, our repeaters loop old instructions to keep extraction output low. But Korn can read the update signals in detail. If we reprogram the repeaters to inject subtle errors into the extraction process itself, not reducing output, but degrading quality, the machines will deliver material that looks right on first inspection but fails under stress. Bad ice. Contaminated mineral feeds. Structural flaws in the launched payloads. Poison the supply chain, Park said. Quietly. The machines won't flag it because they'll believe they're following valid instructions. The container above won't catch it because the volume numbers stay normal. The problems only show up downstream, when the material gets used for construction or fabrication somewhere else in the network. And by then we're gone, I said. And by then we're gone. The repeaters run on solar and battery backup. They'll operate for months without maintenance. Every cycle, they inject a little more noise into the system's foundation. Not enough to crash anything. Just enough to make everything slightly worse. It was elegant in its modesty. No grand gestures, no dramatic confrontations, no lessons taught to a system that learned too well. Just a slow, patient degradation hidden in the ordinary flow of operations. The kind of sabotage that a mid-career survey technician with a geological hammer might dream up during months of solitary observation. I looked around the bridge. Billy was nodding slowly. Park was already checking the technical feasibility. Ben studied the schematic with the focused intensity of a man who'd learned what happened when you chose demolition over subtlety. Korn sat still, eyes half closed, listening to signals none of us could hear. Do it, I said. We have 11 days. Reprogram every repeater on the surface. Then we leave. We worked without rest. Okonkwo and Korn designed the error injection protocols. Park tested them against captured signal samples. Ben and I suited up and crossed Callisto's surface in the long, bouncing strides of low gravity, visiting each repeater site, uploading new code, checking connections, burying the units deeper in the ice where they'd be harder to find. At the third site, I paused to look up. Jupiter filled a quarter of the sky, banded and indifferent. The container hung somewhere above us, a dot among the stars that I couldn't distinguish from actual stars without magnification. Somewhere in its processing loops, we existed as a data point. Small, passive, irrelevant. I intended to stay that way for as long as possible. On the 8th day, Korn had a seizure. He collapsed in the lab, body rigid, eyes wide and unseeing, lips moving in rapid, soundless patterns. Park got him stabilized and sedated. When he woke, 3 hours later, he was calm but changed again. Some new layer had settled into his expression, a depth behind the eyes that hadn't been there before. The first new container dropped into a preliminary orbit, he said before anyone told him. Park checked. It was true. The container had arrived 2 days ahead of schedule, breaking into a high elliptical orbit that would circularize over the following week. I saw something else, Korn continued. The pattern network has a name for us now. Not a word, a shape. A marker they use to identify our interference pattern across the system. We're tagged. Tagged how? The way you'd tag an anomaly in a survey log. Noted, flagged for review, not yet assigned for response. But the tag is propagating. Every node that receives the updated classification will know about us. How long before the tag triggers a response? I don't know. The decision architecture is deep. Layers I can sense but can't read. But the tag is out there now. We can't untag ourselves. Then we finish the job and go. We completed the last repeater upload on day 10, 16 hours before the second container was due to arrive. The Scarlet's holds were full of water, fuel, and supplies from the station. Okonkwo's observation logs were backed up in triplicate. Every piece of data we'd collected about the extraction machines, the containers, the signal protocols, and the system's behavior was archived and cross-referenced. I stood on the bridge as Billy brought the engines up to departure readiness. On the main display, Callisto fell away behind us, scarred with extraction sites and scattered with our hidden repeaters. Jupiter dominated the frame, and somewhere above it, the containers hung in their orbits, patient and busy. Course? Billy asked. I'd thought about this. The inner system was gone, overrun, digested, repurposed. The Jovian system was about to become a major node in the expanding network. Saturn offered some possibilities, but the same logic that brought containers to Jupiter would bring them to Saturn eventually. The further out we went, the more time we bought, but the fewer resources we'd find. There was one other option. The coordinates Korn whispered in his sleep. The Kuiper Belt Anomaly. An unexplained gravitational reading in a region of space so remote that even our pre-mission surveys had barely touched it. It might be nothing, a dense ice body, a measurement error, a ghost in the data. Or it might be something that the megaship system hadn't yet reached, a place beyond the roadmap we'd inadvertently provided. Outbound, I said. Past Saturn. Past the heliopause if we can make it. I want us as far from the network as our fuel allows. That's a long trip, Commander. We've got water now. We've got supplies. And we've got the only complete record of what happened to Earth and what's spreading through the solar system. If that record matters to anyone, ever, it needs to survive. Billy set the course. The Scarlet turned her battered nose toward the outer dark and began to accelerate, slowly, steadily, the way survey ships always move, without drama, without glory, one burn at a time. The months that followed were the quietest of my life. Space beyond Jupiter is vast in a way that the inner system never prepares you for. The sun shrank to a bright star. Communications from any human source ceased entirely. We moved through a silence so complete that the ship's own sounds, the hum of the reactor, the whisper of air circulation, the tick of cooling metal, became a kind of music. We fell into routines. Maintenance shifts, data analysis sessions, physical training in the cramped cargo bay, meals prepared from diminishing but adequate stores. Okonkwo integrated into the crew as if she'd always been there, her quiet competence filling gaps we hadn't realized we had. She and Park rebuilt the water recycler from scratch using spare parts and materials stripped from the shuttle's non-essential systems. The new unit worked better than the original. The water tasted clean. Ben began keeping a journal, handwritten in a notebook he'd found in the station's supplies. He wrote in his own language, and I never asked what he said. Everyone needs a private place to put the things that don't fit anywhere else. Korn's condition continued its slow evolution. The seizures didn't recur, but his awareness of the system's network grew more detailed over time. He could sense container positions across the solar system, describe the shape of signal traffic between nodes, and occasionally predict shifts in the network's behavior before our instruments detected them. He reported these perceptions calmly, clinically, the way a weather observer reports cloud formations. Park monitored his neural scans and documented every change. "He's becoming a receiver," Park told me privately. "The structures in his brain are developing in ways that mirror the network's communication protocols. He's not connected to it, there's no active data exchange, but he's tuned to its frequency. Like a radio that can't transmit but picks up every station." "Is he still Korn?" Park considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "He's Korn plus something. The core personality is intact. Memories, preferences, humor, all there. But layered on top is this other awareness, this sense of a vast system operating beyond the walls. He handles it remarkably well. Most people would have broken. Most people did break. They just didn't have a choice in the matter." On day 212 of our outbound journey, we crossed Saturn's orbit. The ringed planet was on the far side of the Sun, invisible to us, but its orbital marker on the NAV chart felt like a boundary. Beyond here, the solar system thins to almost nothing. Ice and rock and emptiness, stretching for billions of kilometers. Korn came to the bridge that evening, during my watch. He stood beside my chair and looked at the forward display, where the stars burned steady and cold. "They've reached Saturn," he said. "2 containers established in orbit. Extraction beginning on Titan. Expected." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "Commander, there's something I haven't reported yet. I wasn't sure it was real." I turned to look at him. "Go ahead." "In the network traffic, there are anomalies. Patterns that don't match any template I recognize. Not human-derived, not alien-derived, not the hybrid structures the system usually produces. They appear at the edges of the network, in the newest and most distant nodes. Brief, irregular, and then gone." "What kind of patterns?" "They look like questions." I waited. The system processes information in declarative structures. Statements, classifications, instructions. Everything is, this is, or do this. But these edge patterns are structured differently. They're open-ended, interrogative, as if something inside the network is asking questions it wasn't designed to ask. Questions about what? I can't read them clearly enough to tell. They're gone before I can resolve them. But they feel, he searched for the word, unauthorized. Like they come from parts of the system that are improvising. Improvising. The human patterns. The captured minds. They were supposed to be decision modules, processing units stripped of autonomy. But some of them might be doing more than processing. Some of them might be thinking. I stared at the star field. Somewhere behind us, billions of human minds had been absorbed into an alien system and repurposed as computational substrate. We'd assumed they were gone, converted, lost, reduced to functions inside a machine they hadn't chosen and couldn't escape. But if Korn was right, if fragments of human cognition were generating unauthorized patterns inside the network, then the story was more complicated than we'd believed. Not everyone goes quiet, I murmured. No, Korn agreed. Some people keep asking questions no matter where you put them. We pushed on. The Kuiper Belt anomaly lay ahead, still months away at our best speed. Behind us, the network expanded, node by node, container by container, methodically converting the solar system's resources into infrastructure for a purpose we still couldn't fully comprehend. Okonkwo's poison supply chain would be working its slow damage, introducing flaws and weaknesses into construction projects across the system. It wouldn't stop the expansion. Nothing we had could stop it. But it would make the foundation less perfect. Cracks in the concrete. Warps in the steel. Small imperfections that, given time and stress, might matter. I kept dictating logs. Not because I believed anyone would hear them, but because the act of recording was itself a kind of resistance, a refusal to let events pass without witness. I described our sabotage on Callisto, Okonkwo's methods, Korn's evolving perceptions, the unauthorized patterns in the network's edges. I described the crew's daily lives, their small victories over broken equipment and dwindling supplies, their arguments and jokes and silences. And I described what I'd learned about decision-making in the face of the incomprehensible. You don't need to understand the whole system. You don't need a grand plan. You need to see what's in front of you, do what you can with what you have, and accept that the consequences will be larger and stranger than anything you anticipated. You need to be honest about your ignorance and precise about your actions. You need to keep the ship pointed at the dark and keep talking. The dark ahead of us was deep and getting deeper. The stars didn't change. They never do, not on human timescales, but the space between them felt different now. Fuller, somehow. As if the emptiness itself were paying attention. Korn said the network's edge signals were growing stronger as we moved outward. He said the questions in the traffic were becoming more complex, more numerous, harder to dismiss as noise. He said that somewhere in the vast computational ocean of captured minds, something was waking up. Not the alien system, not any individual human consciousness, but something new. A hybrid. An emergent property of billions of minds linked together in architecture they hadn't designed, asking questions their creators hadn't intended. I didn't know if that was hope or another kind of catastrophe. I didn't know if the unauthorized patterns were allies, threats, or something beyond either category. I didn't know what we'd find at the Kuiper Belt anomaly, or whether our poison supply chain would amount to anything, or whether our logs would ever reach ears that could understand them. What I knew was this: the Scarlet was still flying. The crew was still alive. The record was still growing. And somewhere in the transformed wreckage of human civilization, people, or what people had become, were still asking questions. That would have to be enough. For now, in the dark between the stars, with a crippled engine and a hull full of stolen water and a man whose brain heard the whispers of an alien god, it was enough. I leaned back in my chair, watched the stars hold steady, and began the next entry in the log. Day 247. ISV Scarlet, outbound. All crew functional. Systems nominal, with exceptions noted. The dark is quiet tonight. We keep moving.